I think it's time to start with the program for the second half of the day. Iterative Product Localization is the title of presentation by Nikolay Titkov, who is now doing localization of several products for Wargaming. So let's give him a warm welcome.
I'm in here today. So, localization of an iterative product. Within this speech, I will try to cover 5 main things about localization at all and localization of iterative product in particular. So, the things are integrating localization into the development process at the earliest stages, then cooperation with regions, tracking changes to existing strings, issues that arise from bad and insufficient cooperation between development and localization, and the last one is Localization QA. Obviously, this section is actually QA section, so I cannot just not talk about Localization QA. So before we jump to the first point, I'd like to say a few words about this iterative product part. So we'll talk about this a bit later, but from localization standpoint, it means that you're working with a product that periodically changes, that it changes in terms of both context and content and text. And if you're lucky enough, you even know these periods and you can plan your work accordingly. And there is another one, another thing is that everybody knows who is to blame if anything goes wrong. So we're gonna start with the very beginning. So why do we need to integrate localization at the earliest stages at all? If we put it simple, the earlier you give your copywriters and log guys a chance to see the implementation, to see how the game will look like, and some files to work with, maybe some text to work with, the less headache you will have at final stages when there are much more important questions should be decided, like before the release, or release of the game, or an update, like deployment things, technical issues, some last fixes, etc. So some days ago there was also a situation with one of games. I don't know if you have heard about it. So the game, the developers apparently had some issues and had to postpone localization after like 2 weeks after the release, and that caused a huge problems with the Russian community. They actually started to give the game dislikes in Steam and terrible reviews even before they had to play it. But eventually the developers had to implement some kind of a beta localization for Russian. So I'm not sure why this happened, like if it was a mistake of planning or maybe some localization issues itself, but yeah, just saying. So copywriting and localization. These are the two forces that absolutely must work together. We have a UX copywriter in our department, and he's just sitting right next to me, and it's really priceless, because first of all, we can discuss the text even before we see it. And you can always give him a dig in the ribs and ask, like, what is it? What is this supposed to mean? What is that supposed to mean? Because every letter that is in the game, he either wrote it or reviewed it somehow. So basically, you have a person that is always ready to answer your questions if you have any. And even if you are like outsourcing localizations, it is a good idea to assign a person, if you don't have a separate person who is responsible for text, to assign a person who will be responsible and who will be ready to answer all the questions from localization guys, because this is basically how you build quality of your localizations. So, letting your text and log guys see the very first prototypes for something that will have text in it, like especially UI, is pure gold as well. Because there are situations when people are struggling with harmonizing like a short word in Russian and English against a UI element, and they have absolutely no idea that this word will be later expressed in like 14 symbols in Dutch or German. So sometimes log guys are these annoying people who say, yeah, this is a really great menu, but I'm afraid that its header will be truncated across several localizations at least. And I think it is better when this happens at the initial stage, because it can be really painful at the very end. As at the end there are only two ways. You either try to make it shorter on localization side, and while it might work for some big descriptions, it generally doesn't work at all for single strings, for headers, for buttons, etc. And second one is that you are trying to bombard the UI guys with bugs, and UI guys generally do not like to receive localization or text bugs right before the release. So, if you do not use prototypes, or you decide that you do not want localization guys sneaking around, there are still plenty ways to give them the understanding of how the text will be implemented in the interface. For example, this is something that we asked from our UI guys not so long ago. And it was really helpful for understanding the style of the element and the symbol count. For some materials, we receive symbol count or word count right at the beginning. And this is really cool. Sometimes, however, we get a 100 words limit for the original, but we're told to try to make it 50 words for other languages, and this is usually just impossible because there are many languages where you will definitely get either more words or longer texts, and it's kind of inevitable. We have actually drafted some guidelines for developers. It's a document that allows people to understand the best way for implementing their text into the game. The way that allows you to make everything as simple as possible and kind of relax, because you will not get questions from localization guys every 5 minutes. So the first point is separating strings from the code. Strings that are not separated from the code are called like hard-coded strings, I guess it's known to you. And with hard-code, it's really simple. Basically, if you have hard-coded strings, you will not get them localized at all. At least you later rework them and make them into a text. So there is a bunch of technical specifications related to formats, string IDs, coding, etc., which are very important and must be discussed with the localization team beforehand. If you play by the rules from the very start, you will be the one who benefits eventually. And there is also a point about the descriptive context. It basically means that the string ID should give understanding of where it is located in the interface and what it does. So localization guys should know if it's a header, a tooltip, a button, an option, a checkbox, etc. And if they can do it from first looking at the string, then the context is perfectly fine. And I will later show what happens if it is not. So fonts. Fonts can be really painful, so if you decide to localize the game into, for example, Arabic or Korean, brace yourselves and try to get as many info about the font support as you can, because you might have some troubles with implementation of hieroglyphics. Then breaking a single phrase into separate strings is not a good idea as well, because sometimes localization guys can spend like an hour trying to search Mr. Right for the string, to search the second half of it. And the second thing is that it means you're imposing a certain pattern of how this phrase should be localized or translated. For example, if you break an English Stonewall construction, like if you have in your game entity called hero XP, if you break it into 2 lines, it means that localization guys do not have any alternatives and have to translate it like hero and XP directly, but it will not make sense when they are compounded back. They can surely localize, for example, hero as XP and XP as hero as well, but it's just a mere crunch, and if these strings are reused somewhere else, it will be a total disaster. And it actually brings us to the next point. The next point is about reusing strings in different contexts. And I would like to put a stress on different contexts, because it doesn't mean that you have to create like 100 duplicate strings for the attack parameter of your hero, for example, and make a separate string for 100 heroes that you have in the game, because it will definitely be the same for all of them. However, if you have one attack string to show the parameter, to show that someone is under attack and show that someone is attacking, there will be a problem, because these are different contexts, different parts of speech, and everything is different across different languages. So this is why common sense with things like that will be helpful, really helpful. So localizable data may have more than text only. For example, sometimes UI developers create graphics, draw buttons, and other different elements with text. But you should remember that any buttons or graphical tips that were drawn will have to be redrawn according to the number of localizations you have. So basically, you can also draw something like around the text, but it also creates a problem of spacing, because you never know how long will be the word in different languages. So the best way is to draw something either without text at all, or draw something with text only if you are sure that there will be the localization will not be needed at all. There's also an idea of inviting localization guys for UX lab testings. I visited UX playtest myself and had a wonderful chance to see how players react to my localizations, to what I've translated. And it eventually helped me to fix some potential issues like on the spot. I tried to identify them to see where the problems may be after the game is released and fix them beforehand. In addition, you basically see how the game is played, what players are researching more and looking at more. You see what is good, what is bad, and it kind of helps too. You can also give your professional feedback regarding moments that can be facilitated by the means of text, for example. So if you see that a tooltip is likely to resolve 50 minutes of players' sufferings, you can just tell the developers, and they can take your opinion into consideration as well. So regional adaptation. Here I actually have a couple of examples directly related to localization and some things related to regional influence in general.
This is Sparta!
I guess you all know this guy. When somebody says Sparta, for some reason I have exactly this voice in my head yelling. But obviously the voice is different for people from different countries who watch the movie in their native language. Some people may think that the movie is trash and it doesn't matter. So, however, in some countries it's kind of big. And our regular workflow for localizing voices and recording voiceovers is that we gather samples, send them for review, and wait until producers say us that number 1 is okay for this, number 2 is okay for that. All these numbers are, of course, professional actors. However, recently one of producers in South America said that 2 characters, Alexander and Leonidas, are like very renowned and very famous in his country. So he took some time and found the perfect talents himself. It turned out that there will be no significant difference in pricing for their voices, but it actually may turn into a very positive thing for our players. And I hope they will like this minor change. Another example is also rather recent. We have found out that Russian players are so used to calling one of game entities by their colloquial abbreviation they use on forums and in conversations with each other, that they do not connect the existing name with the feature at all. Like they are so used to this abbreviation, they tend to use it everywhere, and when they go into the game, they do not understand where to find it. So this abbreviation only makes sense in Russian. It cannot be directly translated into English and subsequently into other languages. I mean, it can, but it won't make any sense. And we are now thinking about potential alternatives that will satisfy the players worldwide, because we might take an approach of like a split decision, a separate decision for Russian and separate decision for other localizations. Sorry. Region preferences are also traditionally strong for maps and specials that we have in World of Tanks. For example, many names are usually reviewed for being like short, clear, informative for the players from the region concerned. However, if we speak about the comparison between Russian and English, the map names tend to present almost a direct translation, but it's a bit different for specials. Russian and English names often have only the common topic, not the wording. And sometimes it can be fun to play with various names. Sometimes it can be impossible to take Russian variant and directly translate it into English, because it won't make sense as well. For example, we had this snow vehicle that we had to decorate for the New Year event. In Russian, it was called tankovik. So it's a word pun on снеговик, or a snowman, but if we translate it preserving the logics of the pun, we will just get a tank man, which is kind of not funny at all, and it is an existing word, so basically no pun at all. That's why we decided to play with the very essence of the vehicle. It's a KV-2, and the KV-2 is famous for its very cool howitzer. And when we thought about this, we came up with Snovitsa. Yeah, maybe it's not the funniest thing you'd heard in your lives, but the players took it very naturally and kept using this name like on the forums and everywhere. Then, The following two examples are not directly related to localization, but they show the importance of consulting with regions. There are some events in the world that bring horror and sadness to everyone, and we definitely do not want to hurt our players. That is why, after we received feedback from our regional offices, we skipped version 9.11 for World of Tanks and introduced some changes for the Paris map after the Paris attack. We also have specific strings in the game client that supports the AOGAS, Anti-Online Gaming Addiction System, which is effective in China. And some text related to IGR and game room regulations in Korea. Tracking changes. Fortunately, our infrastructure for text exchanges is rather simple, especially for World of Tanks PC. The text is uploaded to a folder, and our tool, the tool that we have been using for quite a bit now, it's called Sysolizer, can display all the source text from the folder with keys, comments, etc. Basically, it looks like this. So when the text is updated, we can see that new strings are marked as not translated, and modified strings are shown as for you. After that, we need to process those strings and localize them into English, which will be source language for most of our localizations. Sysolizer has many strong sides. It's a really good tool for storing and reviewing all localizations at once. But it's not very convenient to translate inside of it. So we tend to do the exporting from Sysolizer and working in CAT tools. CAT tools mean computer-assisted translation tools. So basically, we do it for building strong and huge translation memories. TMs that can significantly help us later. For example, if string ID changes, or that if something is removed and then returned back to the game, we will have it in our TM, and these translations will just be pasted into the... so we will basically not waste time on translating it again and again and again. The only thing we should remember is that the translation memory must be absolutely impeccable. Therefore, if we do some editing in Sysolizer afterwards, we need to have these edits in our translation memory as well. Otherwise, we might face certain problems with strings being relevant. Another solution is that Sysolizer allows exporting TMX files, which can be later imported to the CAT system. So basically, when the update is finished, you have all strings completed, approved, and reviewed. You can just export them and have an up-to-date translation memory. So I guess the fourth part will be a bit relaxing. Here you can see what happens when people ignore the things that I have mentioned in the text requirements part. First thing is legacy strings. So these are strings that remain after a feature was removed from the game, for example. They do not have any particular value and can be really annoying if you're dealing with 39 localizations. You have to either skip them or mark them in a special way for them not to get into exchange. Theoretically, we could exclude them ourselves, but there is always a minor chance that they will be implemented once again, that the text in them will be changed to something relevant. And in that case, if we exclude them ourselves, we will just miss them, and that will not be great at all. Still, the best solution, as I see it, is removing such strings after the feature is removed from the game and get them back if the feature is back or is updated or something like that. This perfectly shows how you can create a 100% useless string ID, and on the other hand, a perfectly clear one. So you can just look at the file name and key on the top screenshot. It's called a random localization string not in combat with the text not in combat, so it's kind of Captain Obvious. And it doesn't make any, it's not helpful at all. We do not understand where this string is, how it works. But the bottom picture shows the context of a, how is it called, of a healthy person. Because we have two strings coming one by another. One of them is a title, and second one is description. It says what is it, and how it gives us a hint how it should be translated or localized. Then this just happens when you are reusing strings in similar context. And you create 100 duplicates that basically tell us the same. In this particular case, one string for all of these allied units would be more than enough, as it only appears to show the type of a unit which can be affected by the ability you have. Then just a ton of placeholders, and usually nobody knows what will take the place they are holding. Because it's a pretty general practice to create many placeholders for things that you're planning to do, and then have your plans cancelled and just leave them as they are. So this is kind of, maybe it's all for the examples, but the only thing I would like to mention is that such issues, they all have the similar effect on the game and its localization. It becomes more complicated and therefore more expensive. It's as simple as that. Localization QA. So localization QA is a very interesting and specific thing, which is different from the functional one. We have tried to launch it in-house because that way we can ensure the AAA quality of our localizations. We can perform it on a regular basis and apply it at stages where we need it most. And of course, it allows us to reduce localization QA cost. Our localization QA guys are working in Minsk and Prague and trying to cover Group 1 languages. So our languages in localizations are split among several groups according to their importance and according to the number of players that use them. So in Minsk we have specialists for English, Russian, German and Spanish localization QA, and in Prague we already have Czech and French guys, and will soon open Italian, Turkish and Polish localization QA. As I already said, localization QA is a bit different from the functional one, at least because they have to bear in mind three aspects of localization quality: technical, linguistic and adaptation aspect. All the issues they have to deal with right before you. So basically, every technical aspect brings a linguistic aspect and adaptation aspect after it. All these aspects require significant expertise, and this expertise is rather peculiar because you have to be both a QA engineer and linguist. And in addition, you have to know the culture of the country you are QAing for. So I can actually remember all bug types submitted by our team, starting from the broken tooltip mechanics, ending with a missing dot somewhere, and not to mention that in some cases our colleagues find mistakes made by native speakers. this is actually it. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask.
Hello. So the main theme of your presentation, as I understand, is text localization. But what about content localization?
Sorry, you mean content adaptation?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically Localization QA is also dealing with content adaptation for different regions. But this happens more on the, so we basically have two stages. When content is created, it is being approved at once by different representatives from different regions. And if they find it somehow inappropriate, we are thinking about how to change this. If this is art component, it is going back into the art department with the corresponding comment. If this is about text, we try to think about ways to adapt text to the region. Then, if such a thing happens when something was not noticed before, our localization QA is also responsible for such things, for looking at content that might be deemed inappropriate by players from different countries, for example. That's how it happens.
Thank you. You told about main localization pipeline, but do you have a difference in works with different projects, such, for example, World of Tanks and World of Tanks console?
You mean terminology and something like that?
No. Different main region, different main languages. And
Yes, sure. So for all of our projects, we have different languages set, because when the project is started, producer or director of the game is having a research, learning the audience and learning how the game can perform in different regions and different countries. So basically, when he or she comes to us, they have a certain order for a set of languages that he believes most relevant for the certain project. So for World of Tanks, we have like 39 languages, I guess. But for our last project, our current project we're currently doing, Total War Arena, we only have like 10 for now. So this is, for now, 10 languages are more than enough. But if we see that, for example, some people in some countries take more interest in the game, we might think about adding new languages to the game as well.
I have a question. What do you do when you have events and there's like a certain pun in a certain language? Do you try to find puns in other languages, and is it even possible for having puns in other languages?
Yeah, sure. So we're working with English language. So basically, when we translate Russian into English, and then have different teams in different languages who do their own translations. So when we are translating Russian into English, we're definitely trying to search for some corresponding jokes in English, try to learn the trends, the memes, everything that is trending, and trying to learn the culture of the country we're translating for, and subsequently trying to make a pun as close to the natives as possible.
So I guess let's thank Nikolay.
Thank you.